Why is it common when I'm playing Aurelia or Poppy that I full combo an AD carry and I can usually kill them as long as I'm not too far behind, but a Caitlyn that does her full combo will only bring me to about 40% HP? So the big thing there is Aurelia and Poppy are melee champions, right? Now I'm not going to say what the correct burst threshold for Aurelia and Poppy are, but being a melee champion, you only have a certain amount of time to interact with someone like an AD carry before their team shows up and saves them, or they flash away, or they dash away, or whatever. Comparatively, a character like Caitlyn has a ranged basic attack that does not turn off. And that matters because, like, oh, you full comboed someone with Caitlyn and they didn't die? Perhaps attack them until they do, right? And so, like, saying that an AD carry's full combo should be able to kill a tank versus, like, or a bruiser versus, like, a bruiser's full combo being able to kill an AD carry or a tank. An AD carry. It's like, it tends to be more important for, like, bruisers to deal some degree of burst to squishy champions. Again, you know, there's levels of burst that are too much. Like, that's a real thing, right? I'm not saying Poppy, when building full tank, should just be able to, like, 100 to 0 an AD carry in a second, right? But it's not necessarily a bad thing that if you full combo an AD carry, you put them at risk, versus if an AD carry full combos you, you're not at risk, given AD carries can continue to full combo you repeatedly until you die with their ranged basic attacks. Another thing to note too is ranged champions in general tend to remain threats. This is just general range characters, you know, depends on the character. But ranged champions, like, if you flash away from a ranged champion, especially a ranged AD carry, that ranged champion / AD carry potentially could still keep attacking you and killing you. Whereas, like, if you flash away from a Jax, that's, you know, in a lot of situations, not as easy for that Jax then to be like, well, now I'm going to, like, keep up the assault on you, right? And so creating distance from melee characters tends to be, in the average case, a lot more powerful than, you know, that same type of moment for a ranged champ. And that matters as well. What about some games that are unwinnable, like Fed Mord versus Gapped AD Carry? So one of the things you have to remember about League of Legends is League of Legends is a team game with classes. Team game means different people in the game matter, and classes mean that, you know, certain characters are good against certain things, and other characters like and weak against certain things, right? And so a misconception about League is that if two champions, whoever they are at even footing in terms of gold, it should be a skill-based matchup, right? Like, that's a misconception, though, because that's not what makes a good game of League of Legends. Certain characters, even if they're literally at the same golden level than you, are going to be much stronger than you based on your class. Like, as an example, assassins tend to be really, really good at killing AD carries before the AD carries then can turn around and kill them or, like, deal with them, right? But then AD carries tend to be really good at, like, having a Lulu keep them alive versus the assassin, and then they can turn around and kill the assassin when the assassin fails to kill them, right? And so it's less important that every single 1v1 in the game is perfectly matched, assuming even gold or whatever. And it's more important that, like, you as a player understand the strengths and weaknesses of your character and, like, know the matchups and fights you're allowed to take at even, at ahead, at behind. Know the matchups that you're not going to be able to take. Know the matchups that, you know, you need a friend to help you out with, things like that.
What's your personal opinion on lane swaps in pro play and high elo? Do you think they should be fixed? My opinion is yes, they should be fixed. I think they are okay if they are a very rare occurrence. Like, if, you know, like 1 in 100 games or something, there's a lane swap somewhere. Like, I actually think that specifically adds to the game. Like, very small amounts of, like, crazy weirdness and variety generally are good for the game. So, like, if there was ever a world where it's like lane swaps happen 1 in every, like, 100 games or so or whatever, that's, like, pretty cool, I think. Now, that said, when they're happening in any real degree of frequency, my opinion flips in that I think they're really not great for the game. And one of the reasons I don't like lane swaps is they are a way to avoid playing the game, right? Like, I don't think lane swaps generally, when they happen, are like a compelling, interesting strategy that represents like a team playing well, but instead kind of like represents a team like avoiding playing the game, basically. I'd compare them very similarly to like funnel strats or having like a perma roam Janna top laner or something like that, where it's like, I think there's like, laning phase is a pretty important part of League of Legends, and I don't think the game looks better when, oh no, who do I ban? I should have banned Zed. I don't think the game looks better when like the best players in the game are opting into avoiding the laning phase against their opponents. And so generally I'm not a fan of them, personally. Perma roam Janna top lane, am I being called out? Perma roam Janna top lane was kind of messed up, dude. To like have a laner that would like, she walks to top lane, spends like 1 level there, and then leaves for the rest of the game and still wins. It's like, not ideal. Generally, like, we generally think it's a good thing where in League of Legends, like, success in the laning phase to some degree means success in the rest of the game. Oh, the other thing I don't like around lane swaps, and this is important too, because I was mentioning, like, I don't like lane swaps because they're not playing the game, things like that. The other reason I don't like lane swaps is they kind of just make top laners miserable, right? Like, I think it is pretty lame to, like, have a thing where it's like, if you're a top laner, if there's any real chance of just like, oh, I guess you don't get to play the game because it's a 2v1, right? Like, I think that's pretty rough as well. Are there any new monster champions? So we've made monster champions in the grand scheme of things recently. Nefiri and Smolder are both monsters. In regards to monsters, though, a reality of monsters is like, we only release X number of champions a year. And monsters tend to be fairly... Ugh, God, this guy. Monsters tend to be fairly unpopular with most players. That doesn't mean we should never make them, to be very clear. I'm not saying we should never make monsters, but they tend to be fairly unpopular. And so when I say like, hey, monsters are unpopular, that's okay, by the way. Like, it's okay to make champions that'll be less popular, right? Like, you don't have to make every champion like, you know, an Ezreal or Yasuo, as an example, right? But it's just kind of a thing where it's like, in terms of percentage of characters we release, it probably doesn't make a sense to make a high percentage of them monsters, given that, you know, if we're trying to release characters that make, you know, X number of players happy, you have to, like, consider that, right?